Hey, everybody, listen up. This is Dee Snider, formerly of Twisted Sister. Yeah, you know me. And you're listening to Appetite for Distortion with my best buddy and big toe, Brendo.
You know where you are. I said it.
This is Appetite for Distortion.
And welcome to the podcast, Appetite for Distortion, episode 213. My name is Brando. Super excited for today's guest, a guest that I've wanted to speak to, not just since the beginning of this podcast, but since the beginning of my career. I've met him once, briefly, during a different part of my radio life, but Dee Snider. Dee, how are you, sir?
What's up?
Oh, wow, I get to see you. Okay, that's only fair that you get to see me as well. Hey,
I didn't know if they on camera or was it audio, video, what? I don't know. Got to be ready. Got to be ready.
Yeah.
I'm actually ready as I can be in a mostly empty house. We're moving, so we've got this very non-metal sort of oddly lit, yes, Beatles yesterday, today, album cover vibe going here. Half dark, half light. I don't know.
I love it. Oh, and I can't believe I'm not going to get up now and waste your time, but I have a poster because if we're only releasing the audio of this, but it's an autograph by you and the original Twisted Sister.
I'll see if it's real.
Oh, it's real. Oh, my girlfriend put it somewhere, but and it has the late and great AJ Pero and Mark.
Oh, that's the money right there. I mean, I've seen many recent signed albums and stuff, and sadly, that's the missing name.
Well, it is, and here's the connection that it's from WRCN where I used to work.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and
I used to work there too.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. So not just being a Long Island boy, because I grew up in Baldwin. You did.
Oh yeah, no shit. Where?
Baldwin Harbor.
Oh, Harbor rat. What street?
814 Van Buren Street. I still remember.
I know Van Buren. I used to drive for Grand Avenue cab.
Okay.
Yeah. And when in 1974, and so I had to take people from the train station all over Baldwin. I've been to Van Buren many a day. Yep.
Oh, beautiful. I mean, my dad had his dental practice off Grand Avenue. So, I mean, it's not just knowing you from, obviously, wherever you grow up, it's like, okay, you know who your hometown heroes are. And in addition to that, obviously, Twisted Sister is famous enough and in the lexicon of anyone who's into rock and roll. And me, obviously, going in the radio route, traditionally, kind of like you did, WRCN, WBAB, stations you've been, WPDH used to carry House of Hair. So
absolutely.
So as someone who's been so busy, who's done so much, you must be going nuts right now. You started off by looking at your empty walls. Is this the longest you've ever gone without touring? Like since you've been a professional?
I don't know. There was a 5-year period after the demise of Twisted Sister, during the failing of Desperado, and before Widowmaker. There was 5 years that I unintentionally was off. So that was a long dry spell. I do so many different things, and I'm constantly feeding my own fire. So I had decided this year, my management think I'm Nostradamus because I told them last year, I'll be doing no live shows in 2020. And now they think there's some sort of prediction. When I'm focusing on my writing, not music. I wrote my first fictional novel, which is out. I'm looking for a publishing deal for that. Started my second one. I was supposed to be directing my first feature film, My Enemy's Enemy, which I wrote. And now I've been hired to write another reimagining of a horror film for another company. So I've been just so nonstop busy with writing. I haven't had a chance, and then plus preparing the live album for release and all that. So I've been nonstop But my wife said to me, we're moving right now. And I said, it's great. We have this window to move. She said, we've had a big window to move. You just keep thinking of things to do. Technically, you have nothing you have to do besides record your radio show.
That's what makes being a fan of Dee Snider so great, because there's always something new going on, and it's not just music, because I'm a horror movie guy myself. I think Strangeland, one of the most underrated horrors I've ever seen. It's just, I know you've been asked this, and can you talk about, before I forget, like whether it's a sequel or what's the horror news that you can kind of tell us, if you can?
Well, Strangeland, was groundbreaking. It was intended to be groundbreaking. It was the first film rated R for scenes of torture. You're welcome. Inspired the whole torture genre, and it was ahead of its time. When it was, it's become a cult film, which is great. And there was a sequel immediately slated and the writing started immediately after the release of Strangeland. Strangeland 2 was being worked on, and then company Shooting Gallery went, they were indicted by the federal government. That's happened to me twice in my career, by the way, with Strangeland and with Widowmaker. I socialized with the best people. And then it was stuck in a court battle for 7 years, and where I was trying to get the creative rights back. And then it's been on and off again with so many companies that wanted to make it. And then, we're talking about independent films, and then it didn't happen. So I kind of got not soured on the idea, but I just said, you know what? I'm not going to, it's like that girl you want really bad, but the more you pay attention to her, the less she's interested. So now I'm working on, if I pretend I don't care, now she'll come to me. So far it hasn't worked. That said, my writing as a screenplay writer is really hitting its stride right now. And I've written a movie called My Enemy's Enemy, which I have a deal on, and I was supposed to be directing in May, but it's been pushed back till next year due to COVID. And and that is going to be groundbreaking. Again, that's why I've waited so long to make another horror film. I either want to do a sequel to Strangeland or something new, inventive, creative. This is going to be a new voice in the horror community. And by the way, deeply disturbing.
I can't wait. I can't wait.
Oh, yeah. And then the other thing is I've been hired to write a reimagining of a classic 80s horror film. I can't say which one at this time.
All right.
But they've hired me to write it. I first had to do a treatment, and everybody just flipped out. So they're negotiating my deal right now to write the screenplay, and I may be directing that one as well in 2021. So a lot going on in the horror world. I'm pumped. I'm all hoping that leads to. I've got a new production company called Demon Scope, and my filmmaking company, and I'm hoping it's all going to put me in a position to say I want to make Strangeland 2, and finally, and be in a position to say I want to do what, like where I'm in charge as opposed to, So I'm hoping these next two movies put me in a good place to finally make Strangeland 2. Right on.
And I'm excited because in addition to, talking rock, doing this podcast, talking to rock stars like you, I'm spending my time watching 80s horror movies. That's my loves together. So as I mentioned before, you're giving back to your fans, however they find you, whether it's through horror, through music, the live DVD. I watched some of it last night, and it's super entertaining. It's not just watching you live, but your banter with the crowd and the interviews that go on with it. So you're giving your fans a lot to keep themselves sane during this time.
Again, I seem like Nostradamus, but I will not. Releasing a live album now is like the best thing to be releasing, but it took a year to get that finished. So it's not something you can just say, I'm going to do a live album.
It just worked out.
It took a lot of preparation. But I wanted to capture what I do. I'm a front man. There are some who have said I'm one of the great front men. And one of the things I do is I know, as Lemmy Kilmister said to me, and a dear friend, but he said, shortly before he died, he said, Dee, you're one of the three best frontman I've ever seen.
Wow.
And by the way, he saw the Beatles at the Cavern Club and the Stones at the Marquee.
Yeah.
And he wrote it for Hendrix. The guy's seen shit. And he said, but you are the best at talking to the audience. And on this record, I capture what he's talking about. You know, there's some people say I'm doing stand-up comedy in between songs. But that to me is part of being a front man, to engage the crowd, bridge that gap between the band and the audience, and connect with them on another level beyond the music.
Agreed. And this leads me to a question we often talk about on this podcast. One of the great frontmen that has been mentioned when, between fans and historians, whatever, is Axl Rose. And I want to talk about a tweet that you wrote less than a month ago. Brother Axl Rose, for what it's worth, I stand with you. And I'm assuming, because he's not as vocal as you unless it's on Twitter. So he's been tweeting a lot of political stuff. So if you wouldn't mind, just elaborating, because I want from Axl what you're giving fans. You're so tangible. You're grounded. It's not saying I don't know Axl as a person. Maybe he's just a shyer guy, but I'm not getting from him. And when he's talking politically, he's only giving us a little bit. You go all in, and I know exactly where you stand. So if you
I go balls deep. I know that he's been speaking out against Trump, and it's against the world of politics as it is today in general. And we're headed down a very dark path. Our democracy is in jeopardy, and I know there's quite a good portion of the metal audience that's on the other side of this debate and this argument. And that's the thing. It should be a debate. It should be an argument. Unfortunately, it's become this hardened, them or us situation where there is no communication. There is no exchange of ideas or thoughts. There's no, oh, you know what? I see what you're saying there. And I always pride myself on being that guy that could hear something and have my position changed. But it's very disappointing to see how hardened people have become, and it's getting ugly. I mean, it's brother against brother, literally, in my family, to the point of physical violence. And my family is not the only family that's like that.
Right.
And it's very weird to see that amongst siblings who grew up together, shared so much together, but now because of a political leader, one person, they've become well, I should say both sides. I should say both sides become so opinionated that it could get actually physically violent. And that reflects on society today. I think there's some ugliness ahead. So I just wanted Axl to know he's not alone there. Sebastian Bach's been very vocal. Yep. Tracy Guns and I have become best friends on social media. I never met the guy, but we're working on music now together. We're like, dude, we just become best friends. Because we're like individuals. But there are some people speaking out, and in spite of the fact that our fan base tends to be on both sides of here. So there's a lot of people who say, I want to stay out of the fray. I don't want to offend anybody. Right. But I can't do that longer. I can't do that any longer. You got to take a stance, especially at a time like this. You got to be a voice.
And you are the ultimate voice. Isn't there something to be said? And I just shared the picture of you, in front of Tipper Gore, the famous shot of you with the cut off jean shirt and everything. I guess, how do you compare that America to this America? And doesn't it also show, because last night, now it's trending on Twitter, Billie Eilish shouldn't be speaking out. And good for her. She just turned 18. Good for her. But musicians can't speak. I don't buy that. Everyone is a person, is allowed to speak. So you, of all people, you would think that conversation would have ended in 1985. Oh, what do you know? You're just a singer. Why do we still have to have the conversation in 2020 that why you are allowed? Even though some people may not agree with you, half of Twisted Sister fans may not agree with you, or half of GNR fans may not agree with Axl, but why, like you said, why can't we talk? Why are we still having this conversation that you and Axl and other musicians are allowed to say something?
It's mind numbing, actually. The stay in your lane, know your place mentality. As if, first of all, it's used on everybody who speaks of something. I mean, they are plumbers or lawyers or doctors. They're speaking their political minds.
Right.
Why shouldn't an actor or a musician be allowed to speak theirs? I think the thing that is the rub is that we have a greater outlet to more people to express it to. But after having a B-movie actor as president and a reality show star as president, I mean, those lines, even if you say they know, stay in your lane, shouldn't it have been said to Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump?
Yeah.
Stay in your lane. You're not a politician. Stay in your lane. So it's wholly offensive. It goes against everything democracy has ever stood for. And music has been political forever.
Right.
There's politics has been expressed through music since before rock and roll, since the beginning of time. It's been one way of getting your message out there, has been through music. And, someone said the other day, they said, well, you're losing half your audience, Dee. And then somebody said, well, Crosby, Stills, and Nash sang "For Dead" in Ohio. It didn't seem to kill their career. We should be allowed to express ourselves, and then of course, don't get me going. I mean, we're not going to take it. Was all about that. I just never thought that I'd have to be turning my guns on fellow rockers. That was where I could take was a fuck you to. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
To parents and teachers and bosses and the man, and now all of a sudden I got my fellow rockers behind me going, hey, you can't say that, you can't do what the fuck, and I'm trying to take guns on them, and I'm singing it at the people that I wrote it for in the first place. So I haven't changed my stripes one iota. Same belief system, same person. I mean, I've grown, I've matured, I'm a better person, I will say that. But as far as beliefs and the things I stand for, nothing's changed. And if you expect them to, you got the wrong rock star, okay?
That's why I love you, Dee. And I know I don't have you for too much longer, and you're this extremely busy guy. I wouldn't piss off my fans if I didn't ask this. And
we got to the top of the hour. You got to the top of the hour.
Oh, I do? I have another 10 minutes? Okay. I thought I had 20. Oh, this is beautiful.
I did. I'm bequeathing you. My next one's on top of the hour. They always give me a cushion so I can catch my breath. I don't know what I need to do. Maybe take a piss once in a while. But I just pissed before I came on here, so I'm good till top of the hour.
Oh, awesome. Beautiful. Because I don't know if because you've been everywhere. I know you've been to some of the stations I've been to, but have you ever been to iHeart in Tribeca or Q104? You've been to Q1043, right?
Yeah, I did a live show from iHeart in Tribeca when I released the ill-fated Dee Does Broadway. Not that I expected it to be faded, actually. My manager said, "Who's going to buy that?" I said, "Probably nobody." So I did a broadcast. So I released that at the iHeart Studios. Yeah.
Okay, sure. So that's where I usually am, and one of the things that I do, I'm the person on the other end running the tour and giving out the scheduled time. So I'm so hypersensitive to respect the DJs before and after me with the when it's a radio tour and all that. So, but totally get it. But going back to before, speaking of democracy, that's my segue to Chinese democracy. I remember talking about this early on in the podcast, and it was so funny. Because like I said, it's like when you said before, you're like a stand-up comedian, but I'm like, no, he's a radio personality. When you called GNR, because we just started the podcast. Well, my current friend, former co-host, right before the reunion, so there wasn't too much to talk about at the time. So of course we talk about Chinese democracy and that the lineup and all that. So your quote "GunsNRoses" comes up, and it makes me laugh. And that's something we've obviously talked about over the course of the podcast. For me, I compare it to sports. Like, I'm a Yankee fan. No matter who puts on that jersey, I root for, right? So there are other fans that aren't like that. It's Twisted Sister doesn't have the same kind of lineup changes that Guns N' Roses have had. So I don't know if you've dealt with this problem personally. So I guess if you can just elaborate, how do you feel now, I guess, about Rose and Roses and Slash and Duff coming back into the band? How do you feel about, I guess, Guns N' Roses, currently?
Guns N' Roses, I love Guns N' Roses. And that Appetite record would be on my Desert Island Classics list. When I was running, jogging, I did my best time ever in my 5-mile run running to that album when it first came out. It was incredible record. And so I'm a fan. But I am a believer in, I hate what Kiss is doing. I hate what Kiss is doing with the guys with Ace and Peter's makeup on. I'm not a fan of people when I left Twisted and I went out at some point and I was doing Twisted music, I never even thought of calling it Twisted Sister without the other 4 guys. And everybody saying, but you're Twisted Sister. You wrote the songs. You're the guy they know, blah, blah, blah. I said, that's not Twisted Sister. And I won't do that out of respect for the other members of the band. I could have made a lot more money doing that, but I would not do that. And when Twisted Sister reunited, the original members, the classic lineup, Mark Mendoza walked in, pulled out a gun, put it on top of his amplifier, then picked up his bass. And when people tell me it's tough to put your band back together, my bass player brought a fucking gun to the first rehearsal. Okay, so and he openly spoken about hating me. Shooting me just gets me madder though. But anyway, so I don't buy it's too difficult, Dee. We couldn't get past our differences. Blah 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 blah. I had to exploit the name of the band. I'm a fan of Guns N' Roses. I'm disappointed that Steven's not there playing drums. I've seen the footage of him joining the band, and it's so awesome.
I know. Yeah.
He does great. I'm like, oh God. I know he's had some physical problems. He's a lovely person. I thought maybe that was the problem. And he gets up there and plays these couple of songs, and he's got that shitty grin on his face, and I thought, it's great. Why isn't he there? It doesn't make any sense to me. Izzy's been that guy that just sort of just always sort of taking off, and I don't know, he's an interesting character. I think that choice is his more than anybody's. I understood from doing my radio show, he was supposed to be in this thing and then showed up for the first show and left or something. I don't know. What do you know about that? Because that's what I've been reporting on my radio show, that he walked out of the sound check and that was it.
Yeah, actually, oddly enough, that story was quote unquote broken on my podcast from a former manager, Alan Niven, who, by the way, if you hear the fire trucks, it's because I'm doing my show in my apartment in Queens. As I mentioned, I'm not in Tribeca, I'm in Queens. I live right by the hospital. So Alan Niven, who still talks to Izzy, he, I guess, mentioned that he was at a sound check, but then there's Guns N' Roses management says he was different, that he just showed up to talk to the guys. So, I mean, Izzy was there. Izzy was involved in some way, but just never made it out on stage. Like, he just took one look at like a setup. But then there was that tweet that Izzy took down that he was complaining about the money. So there's more to the story than what Alan, I think probably what Izzy told Alan even. But that's as far as what I know, and that was told in my podcast.
Yeah. So I'm a believer if you're going to use the brand, you should have the classic lineup unless someone's dead. That's like, to me, it's like excuse for not being there. Well, he's dead. Okay, well then you're excused. You're excused because you're dead. Otherwise, you better show up, and it better be the original band. That's from me.
That's why
I'm a Yankee fan too.
Yeah.
But we can't compare baseball teams because that the whole idea of Roger Clemens playing for Boston all of a sudden, and he puts on a jersey and he's a Yankee. He was a Yankee at that point.
Yeah.
Because there's no true allegiance. These guys weren't born and raised in Boston. They're just being paid enough money to go play for Boston or play for the Yankees or play for the Dodgers.
Sure.
It's different than a rock and roll band.
It's not a perfect analogy, but it's something I've been working on. And I will say,
keep working because that one sucks.
I did agree with you because it really broke my heart at the time when Axl did not accept the Hall of Fame induction. And I talk about now, especially since, look at the way the world is in, and not just politically, but just with the virus and everything. It's just push it aside. Unless somebody brings a gun, this is the time to mend any fences. That's why, I hope Sammy and Eddie work out something. This is we're not going to be here for that long. So, I mean, I did support your criticism, I guess, of the Hall of Fame decision at the time.
Well, thanks. And again, I'm very outspoken about it, but it comes from a fan place. It doesn't come from. It doesn't come from arrogant asshole artist place at all. It's just that this is where I started. I started in the crowd. Look, I'm friends with Alice Cooper, and on my radio show, anytime I introduced a song by Alice or the original band, I said, this is the Alice Cooper band. I really hammer that because to me, as an Alice Cooper fan, it was Dennis Dunaway and it was Michael Bruce and Neil Smith. I mean, it was a band, and Alice went solo and took the name with him and left those guys in the dust. And I have liked much of Alice's solo stuff, but it should be acknowledged that is Alice Cooper solo. There was a band that wrote those great songs that built his career. And I really wanted to see that original band brought back together. And they were brought back together, a couple of last year or something for a couple of songs. It was really that was too little, too late, really.
Well, like I said, at least that's something, but it's not bringing a gun. And I will say, I met you, I'm sure you met a million people. I met you, I think 8 years ago at WRCN on Long Island. And this was the time Mark was a host of a radio show. And it was not Mark was very nice to me, but the radio show host wasn't. It was just a bad show. It was just somebody who paid to be on the radio. Which doesn't, right. You don't do that. Especially somebody who knows radio, you don't do that, especially in mornings. You don't do that's just somebody, whatever. That's a whole other story. So I kept thinking, this guy who has to pay to be on the radio gets to interview Dee Snider. Well, I did it from my apartment, and you could have said no to do this podcast to talk about Guns N' Roses. So I really appreciate your time today. You're obviously super busy. I'm glad I got to enjoy you, quote unquote, live from home. There's a lot of our fans to expect. Is there anything in the immediate future that you want us to know that's coming out?
The movies, I tell you about the book. I'm shopping right now. I'm always surprising people. Recently, a children's book came out that I was not actually formally, I didn't motivate it. They want to take the words of rock songs and put them to pictures for children. And so we're not going to take it and made a toddler's book out of it of toddlers who don't want to eat their food and toddlers who don't. That's the weirdest thing in the world. But I actually has ignited ideas because I am a dad and a granddad for some children's books that I want to work on. So I'm doing that, and I'm writing the scary movies. And I'm recording a Christmas song with some people, some very big international artists for this year. More on that in the near future. Back in the studio working on new music for the follow-up to For the Love of Metal. And so, I'm just constantly creating and doing new things. Hopefully I'm always surprising people and pleasing them somehow, at least some of them some of the time.
Amazing. And I just want to, before I let you go, I'll just say my second radio interview ever was with JJ French, and he was promoting A Twisted Christmas. So you had two Jews promoting a Christmas album.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Some of the greatest Christmas songs of all time have been written by Jewish people, oddly.
That's what he said. That's what he said. That's exactly what he said. That's great. Thank you so much, Dee. This really was a pleasure.
Hey, thanks, Brendo. Pleasure, too. Talk to you again sometime.